I actually feel like some of you have become friends. I've gotten many, many emails and many phone calls and many visits. And, as a superintendent, you don't normally have the same contact with parents as a principal would, for obvious reasons. So thanks for coming, folks. This is another important meeting. What we're trying to do is give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you have of me. I've taken from the various emails and conversations I've had a host of questions that I'm going to answer in advance. Those questions may end up generating more questions. And so tonight isn't necessarily about you coming to the microphones and saying, I support this model or that model, because quite frankly, what we know right now is that when we have the last meeting we had, it was very predominantly in favor of keeping the K through 4 configuration. And then through the emails, if you kept track of all those emails, like I have to, the community was far more equally split. There wasn't a predominant model. And quite frankly, the board is struggling through this issue as well. So let me start by saying tonight is not a board meeting. I need to say that because the board members are here. They're sitting as a majority of the board. And you're going to wonder why they're not talking to you, because they can have conversations and make decisions when they are in a duly noted, posted school board meeting. So what is their role tonight? To listen to you and to take notes. I've made sure that they have plenty of paper and pens so that if you come up with an idea that we haven't pursued or an angle to an idea we haven't thought of, they can jot it down. Their job becomes far more important Wednesday night. And on Wednesday night, they'll be considering these models and maybe making a decision, or I should warn you, maybe saying we need a little bit more time before we make the decision. But I think what we really have done is in the community is had a very, very good, deep dialogue about what redistricting means and equalizing the enrollment between the two schools. So this is my meeting, not their meeting. And so to make things really clear, when they're together on board meetings, I am their employee. When they're not in session, they say, Jim, you run the show between our meetings. So this is kind of Jim running the show between their meetings, even though they're present. And I don't want you to misconstrue what's happening here. I'm only in charge when they let me be in charge between meetings. So this is my meeting. As such, anybody who wants to talk tonight may do so. Just go to the microphone and keep your comments, hopefully, to 3 minutes or less. And hopefully those comments are really questions so that we can do some more answering of questions this evening. As I said, I've listened to many, many of you. I've read what you've written and listened intently. So right now, we have a community divided in terms of a solution, but we don't have a community divided in terms of the problem. And the problem is we have a significant disparity in enrollment between Massway and Moheramet. And in that disparity, we also have a capacity of the building issue. So I don't want to repeat a lot tonight because a lot of this is going to be new as I get to the PowerPoint. But the essence of the problem is we have a building, Moheramet, that has a functional capacity of 349 students, and we have 407 students attending that school. And we have Massway Elementary, which has a functional capacity of 369 students with only 292 students attending. Everybody agrees to that fact. So I want to just share with you a story before we begin the PowerPoint. Some of you know, very few of you know, that lately I have been just gobbling up everything I can read about the founding fathers. And I've been reading about Washington and Jefferson and Madison and Alexander Hamilton and Ben Franklin. So many of the founding fathers. And Ben Franklin, as most of you know, was a great storyteller. I'm not a great storyteller, so I'm going to steal Ben Franklin's story. So this is Ben Franklin talking about a fable of a father and a son and a donkey. And this will connect, honestly. A father and a son were on a journey, and as a show of respect, the son walked while the father rode on the donkey. Probably something we all would do. Along the way, they met a man who thought it totally inappropriate of a healthy man to force his son to walk as he rode. "Don't you think any more of your son than that?" the stranger asked. The father and son thought about it for a bit and decided the stranger just might be right. So the father got off the donkey and allowed the son to ride. They were doing just fine with that arrangement when they met another stranger along the road. "Young man, what are you thinking of?" the stranger demanded to know. "Here you are, a strapping young man riding upon a beast, and your poor aged father must walk. Is that the way you show respect?" Again, the father and the son mulled the situation over and allowed the critic to influence their thinking and behavior. The only way to please everyone, they decided, was for both of them to ride. So they did. And for a while, they enjoyed each other's company and pleasant conversation. They felt comfortable when a third stranger approached, but this traveler had a whole different perspective from the first two. "How can you guys place such a burden upon this poor beast? Your combined weight is too much for this animal. Besides, you both look healthy. Why not walk and give the beast a rest?" So father and son walked and led the donkey. Surely no one can criticize us now, they thought. But when the fourth stranger said, "How foolish of you men to have a perfectly healthy donkey and not use it. Donkeys are made for work. One of you should be riding him." They threw the poor donkey off a bridge. So we know Ben Franklin was great for his fables. So tonight, what I'm really hoping is I'm not your donkey. I do work hard, and I hope by the end of the evening you haven't thrown me off a bridge. So let's begin. So when I started this work with the school board, we started with certain recommendations, goals, and the first one was to decrease the disparity in enrollment between Mohammed at 409 students and Mastway at 292 students. We wanted to bring the enrollment numbers at the two schools within functional capacity, which is 349 students from Mohammed and 369 students from Mastway, and we wanted to create a solution that was permanent, that does not require students changing schools every 5 years or so, and we wanted to eliminate the use of portable classrooms at Mohammed. When I was away, the board decided that they wanted something more from me, and that was to present other options, with at least one being moving the kindergarten from all the kindergartners to Mastway, and that was on November 20th, would say that some of you know, have attended all of these meetings. This was an option that we considered as recently as last August. The timing was awful. The idea was okay. So the options that we've been looking at are redraw the district boundaries, and we've gotten plenty of feedback from community members about the K through 2, 3, 4 option. Many families wanted to throw me off the bridge. Others were thinking seriously about what that could do for us in terms of improving our school district. That option would impact 46 families and 66 students. The other option is just redrawing the bus lines. If we redraw the bus lines, this is the same option. We draw the bus lines. We were capturing above the Circle and Lee, we were capturing a population off of 108, and we were capturing a population in the center of the district. And then the last option was the K2, 3, 4 option, and in that, the entire district becomes fair game for busing. So in tonight's, the heart of tonight is about these frequently asked questions, some of which I had the opportunity to put on our website before tonight, others I have not. All of this presentation is on the website right now. So we put it up before we started this meeting. So for those of you who are looking for a handout, there is no handout. What was in the room for a handout was actually generated by some parents in the room. If you want this in terms of looking back and saying, what did he say, it's on the website. So I'm going to answer some frequently asked questions. So why redistrict? I think I've answered that. We absolutely have a disparity in enrollment. It does impact our instructional program, it impacts safety, and we need to adjust. So that does not mean that Massway and Moheramet have to have the exact same number of students. It's not about equality, it's about equity. Why is it necessary to do anything? Isn't doing nothing an option? I would argue very strongly that doing nothing is not an option. We can't live with the enrollment disparity that exists for very obvious reasons, not the least of which is if your child's in Moheramet, you have a very overcrowded situation that needs to be adjusted in order to create the equity that we want for all of our children. What are the current proposals? I summarized them already. The current proposals are redrawing the bus lines, impacting 3 neighborhoods or 3 areas of the district. The second proposal is the K through 2, 3 through 4 proposal. And as we go through tonight, per the directive of the board, we have 2 other proposals for conversation. If the school board decided to change bus routes to equalize enrollment, will they grandfather current Moheramet students who would be impacted by the changed bus routes? Along the way, I've skirted this issue only because the board hasn't made a decision. But what I would say is it is very likely that the board would grandfather some of the Moheramet students. My recommendation to the board would be the upper elementary, current 2nd and 3rd grade students, largely because they're near the end of their experience at Moheramet. So grandfathering is an option, but it's not something I get to recommend. It's something the school board needs to discuss and decide how far they would want to grandfather children. If they grandfathered everyone, as some have suggested in their emails, then we'll have accomplished nothing. We'll still have the disparity in enrollment. Have other ideas been considered, like moving all the kindergarten students to Massway? Absolutely. We got a pretty strong vocal no to the idea, but I'm thinking that may have been as much about sharing it in August as anything. I think the timing was incredibly poor for us to deal with that issue, but the reason it came up in August is everybody realized, holy mackerel, we have 407 students at Moheramet, and we weren't expecting that many students at Moheramet. Why doesn't the district close new enrollment at Moheramet and direct all new students to Massway? This is sort of an idea, the germ of an idea that ultimately I'll be sharing with a little bit later. Simply shutting down enrollment at Moheramet doesn't solve our issue, but it could become part of the solution to our issue. Could elementary siblings be split? Yeah, they could. And that's one of the things that I have heard the loudest and clearest from parents: please don't separate our siblings. And yet in most of these models, that's a real possibility. I talked about the possibility of bringing grade 5 back to the elementary schools. The issue is, when could that happen? Many years into the future. We're talking 2021-22, largely because the enrollment at the elementary schools doesn't allow us to hang on to those fifth graders once they move from fourth grade to fifth grade, but the projections indicate that we could do that in 2021-22. Then the question that I had was, are there other school systems using a split grade model? So I decided to refine it even further and say, are there other school systems just in New Hampshire? There are tens of thousands of school systems that use a variation of K4, K5, K6. There are thousands of school systems that use a model where they split the grades. Sometimes it's K3 and 4-6, sometimes it's K2 and 3-5. All of those variations exist. So all of these school systems are in the PowerPoint. Some exist on the same campus, and so they have the advantage of the same campus. Others don't. So I put those there for anyone's reference. This was news as we were talking to families and parents and real estate agents who all might be the same person. What was pointed out to me was that home sales in the Moheramet catchment area, if you will, versus the Lee catchment area are dramatically different. And what we were able to document through two different sources, by the way, is that that is a truism, and home sales are 2 to 1. Now, if you think about it, it makes some sense that they would be, because Moheramet largely services Durham and Madbury, where Lee largely services Lee with a sprinkling of other students. The impact of that, by the way, would indicate that if we use a busing solution, we'll be revisiting it, fairly often, at least every 5 years, if not sooner. You used long-range planning committee projections from last year. So between the last meeting and this meeting, the long-range planning committee has published new projections. So I have updated those enrollment numbers. Just as an aside, not necessarily related to this event tonight, we've been hearing for years and years and years that enrollment is dropping in the school system, and indeed it has. Over the last 10 years, we've gone from nearly 2,400 students to 2,000 students. We've been around 2,000 students for the last 2 years, and for the first time, the Long-Range Planning Committee projections indicate that we'll be around 2,000 students for at least 5 years, 5 more years. So that adds an element of stability to the system, but it also did impact the models that I've shared with you and the board in the past. So we are using the newest Long-Range Planning Committee numbers. So here's an indication of just comparing 2 years, and you can see that last year the Long-Range Planning Committee thought there would be about 309 students. There actually was around 292 students. They're projecting 293 students for next year at Massway. In Moheramet, they projected 382 students. We had 407, and they're projecting 407 for next year. So that's just 2 years side by side. But again, for those people who really like to grab onto data, I've given you the entire elementary projection. So it's on the website. You can go to town. I know some people in the room have. They actually have created some really nice graphs and data points for me. But it's there, and you can see what happens over time. Total enrollment at the elementary schools, is going to be around 700 for 3 years, and then it hits the mid-600s. And then ultimately, when you go the furthest out in time, the enrollment drops to 535 students. So what we know is that Lisa Allison and the Long-Range Planning Committee are doing their very best job at making projections, but they also use NESDEC scores, and I use the New Hampshire Association of School Administrators scores, and they all tend to validate each other. But I really would be remiss if I didn't share with you the accuracy of the long-range projection gets weaker the further you go out in time. So when you're really close to the current point in time, the margin of error is less than 2%. When you go out 10 years, the margin of error increases dramatically. So for planning purposes, I pay attention, very close attention to the first 5 years, and let's look at the trend over the next 10. So the board asked me to consider a K option, which we did in August. So that's just resurrecting an idea I shared with them. And then the other option, which is also in the motion, consider other options, was actually not an option that I generated. It's an option that I talked about a year ago in terms of managing enrollment, but these parents took that idea to the extreme and created a managed enrollment option. And essentially what that would mean is I become king of the mountain. And instead of having a prescribed bus route that tells you these kids go to Massway and these kids go to Moheramet, what it does is say this student moving into the district can go to either school based on the enrollment needs of the district. So if I use, for example, the current second grade at Moheramet is right around 22. The current second grades at Massway are around 17. If I controlled enrollment, what I would do is equalize that enrollment through new students moving in. The other piece of this is that they're encouraging me to look at it from a new student perspective. So the youngsters who currently would be impacted by the by the bus route change wouldn't be impacted in this proposal. So it wouldn't require students to change schools, which is a really important option for so many of you. And this idea really was just shared with me last Thursday, but I think it's an idea that has some hope, and it will require additional detail and clarification. It is a K through 4 model, so it's not the split school model. And although, on a personal level, I favor the split school model, I also favor a school district that's working in unison. And right now, if the board made a decision one way or the other, I think that we would have an incredibly divided community. And what I'm trying to do in supporting this is hope to come to a solution that might be supported by the vast majority. I know that I'll never get support on any idea exclusively 100%, but this one seemed to be going in a direction that might generate that kind of support. They were talking about new students coming into the district at the kindergarten level. I added, why would we stop at the kindergarten level? As an example, I had a set of parents say, if you had frozen enrollment in the fall for Moheramet, 30 children moved into the district. Now, in managing enrollment, what you do is you'd manage the population center of the district, which is essentially Durham, and you would then redirect new students to the appropriate school. Now, for all of us here, it may seem like the appropriate school is a no-brainer. It's Mastway. Then I want to go back to that second grade example. So if we're trying to balance grades as well as schools, it's a much more sophisticated model. So I said to them, had we done that in the fall, then it wouldn't just be the new kindergarten students who have not had any siblings, and that's another part of this proposal, siblings wouldn't be impacted. Then we would have had 7 to 10 kindergarten students who go to Mastway. And then if we looked at the 30 new students who never lived in the district, the families bought homes and just moved into the district, and I placed a percentage of those, for this conversation, say 20 of the 30 are in the population center, which is predictable, then we would have moved 27 students to Mastway this fall, and we probably wouldn't be having all of these conversations throughout this school year, because people would know when you're in the population center of the district, you're not guaranteed a school. So another side benefit for this particular idea is we wouldn't require new buses, and people have asked me why we wouldn't. It's because the population center of the district, our buses are generally crossing paths anyway, because you have to come into the population center multiple times in order to move students. No one would be forced to move from their school. The modular could be gone in their model by 2017. In my way of thinking, it could be done by 2015. And we would have appropriate kindergarten space available at Mohermet. So parents who have children with disabilities wouldn't necessarily see their children in the hallways being serviced by teachers or teacher assistants. This is what the map looks like. I've shared maps with you before. So that's the population density of the district, right? That green bullseye. And that little pink rectangle towards the top is Mohermet, and that little pink rectangle off to the left is Mast Way. These are the roads that would be impacted by simply saying that if you move into this area, we'd have to inform our real estate agents that if people move into these houses, they buy houses, they move into the district, or rent houses and move into the district, then the children who are part of that family may go to Mast Way or Mohermet, depending on the needs of the elementary school. And so another side benefit of this is you wouldn't have to manage every 5 years adjusting bus routes, because what you would be doing is managing the enrollment literally every single year. Every single time a child moved into the district, a decision would be made as to which is the most appropriate elementary school. So I did a series of charts just to kind of give you a quick comparison. So the board and superintendent's goals, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, were to decrease enrollment, disparity, meet functional capacity, a permanent solution, eliminate portables, and maintain bus ride length, and unite staff by grade level. As you go through the various models, they all address certain parts of those board goals well, and they all don't support board goals well. And so it's a matter of which of these models makes the most sense against board goals. And then listening to all of you, I mean, it was not just the board telling me what to do, but listening to all of you, there were really some significant concerns expressed by parents. One is, would we grandfather students? I call it grandparenting, you know, for lack of a better word, you know. It's what people respond to. Grandfathering students is possible in the K through 4 bus route redistricting. It's not possible in the K2, 3, 4 model, nor is it possible if you move all the kindergarten children to Mast Way, and it's not necessary at all if you're managing enrollment. The issue of dividing siblings, the K through 4 bus route could divide siblings. The K2, 3, 4 may divide siblings. The all K at Mast Way could divide siblings. And the central office managing enrollment, as that proposal exists as a draft today, would not split siblings. Maintaining a 30 to 40-minute bus ride. Some of our children, many of our children are on the buses less than 30 minutes, but the board and our transportation director work very, very hard to keep the maximum around 40 minutes, and hopefully we don't have too many kids on the bus for that long. But in order to maintain that criteria, we would have to add 2 extra buses to the K2, 3, 4 model, and we'd have to add 3 extra buses to the all K at Mast Way model. And that's because I said to Lisa Hupp, our transportation director, we still have to maintain the integrity of the 30 to 40-minute bus ride. And so what we originally thought last August is we'd have all the kindergarten children routed to Mohermet and then rerouted to Mast Way. And what I asked her to do is not do that, but to put 3 buses on the road, pick up the kindergarten students, and directly bring them to Mast Way. And the managed enrollment model does not require any additional buses because the buses are already on the road. Is there a financial cost? That's another issue for taxpayers and parents. In the redistricting of the bus routes, there isn't. There is in the K2, 3, 4 model of 2 drivers, and there is in the all K at Mast Way and 3 drivers. And managing enrollment, there is no additional buses. I've talked about the bus routes already, and then in terms of uniting our staff by grade level, the only model that does that is the K through 3-4 model, and if we moved all the kindergarten students to Massway, then just the kindergarten if that were to occur. And then somebody asked me if I would do what the cost associated with the various models were, or at that point the K2 3-4 model. So obviously I've talked about increased driver cost. There wouldn't be in redistricting, there wouldn't be in management enrollment. We talked about the 2 additional drivers with the K2 3-4 model, and that would be approximately $60,000. We also have savings in that model. We carry an extra special ed teacher between the 2 schools because that's the way the enrollment works. If we were doing this type of model, we wouldn't necessarily have to have that special ed teacher or the associated aide, and we wouldn't have to have half of a kindergarten teacher because they would all be in the same building, and half of an aide. So when you look at the K2 3-4 model, it actually saves money overall, about $82,500. When you look at the all K at Mastway, it's 3 additional drivers. You can't reduce special ed staffing. You still could reduce a half a K teacher and a half an aide, and that model would cost an additional $42,500. And again, no additional cost for the K through 4 bus redistricting and central office managing enrollment. So, regardless of which model is chosen by the board, we know that we have work to do. And many of you know Carolyn Eastman, our assistant superintendent, and she has been working very, very hard in the last year and a half to bring a cohesiveness to our staff. Some parents note that there's a strong difference in equity between the 2 schools. Some parents don't see any difference. Since I'm new to the district for the last year and a half, I would tell you I do see a difference. So one of the things that we need to concentrate on, regardless of the model, is collaboration and cohesion among our staff, common expectations, and that actually is being assisted by Common Core and the common standards. When I say that, I also want you to know that we value our teachers' creativity. We're not trying to turn them into little teaching machines. That's one of the things that we love about Oyster River, and it's one of the things that we have to maintain. We talked about elementary-wide events. So bringing Dennis Harrington, our Mohammed principal, and Carrie Vaish, our Massway principal, as well as the PTO presidents and our teachers to a common understanding that events need to happen so that both schools get to participate. We could have a conversation, and this is just we could have a conversation with the PTOs to see whether they would be willing to have one PTO serve both schools, so that things like the playground at Mohammed, where the parents worked vigorously to fundraise, could occur at both schools. And then creating that goal of a cohesive Massway and Mohammed. And I had a parent email me today and say, is your goal just at the elementary level? And I wrote back to her and said, no, we know that the initial stage of this is at the elementary level, but we have to have those common expectations so when those 4th graders go to the middle school, everybody knows what those children should know. And then, of course, from the 8th grade to the high school. So it's not just about the 2 elementary schools. It is a K through 12 issue, but it's so obvious at the elementary level to me as a superintendent, and we need to make sure that we're working very, very hard to bring those 2 schools together. So here's where we are. We're at that point where the microphones will be open. I've got all kinds of scribes to my left. I should introduce them. Kenny Rodner, Ed Chalet, Al Howland, Thomas Newkirk, Ann Lane, and Megan Turnbull. They're going to be writing down your thoughts and your questions. I would be encouraging you to, if you want to come to the microphone, to really focus in on a question as opposed to a position, because that's really what's going to educate. Your questions will educate us. If everybody comes to the microphone and says, I support K2, 3, 4, I support all the K at Massway, I support the managed enrollment, it's going to be a long night, and the board really isn't going to leave with important information. What I'm hoping you'll do is you'll come to the microphone and ask a question about any one of these plans. If you didn't see information or a question that was answered tonight, this is the time to ask it. What I will tell you is the same thing I tell you every time we're together. If I don't know an answer, I am not going to bluff. So if I know an answer, I'll share it. If I don't know an answer, it'll be written down, and hopefully by the time we meet as a board on Wednesday night, the board may have taken your question and said, Jim, do you know the answer to this? And I will answer it Wednesday night. Hopefully I won't get to the place where on Wednesday night I don't know the answer, so the whole point of tonight is to make sure that additional information is generated so the board can make a really informed decision. What we do know from all of the emails, all the telephone calls, and all of the sit-down meetings is every one of you cares about the solution. I want you to know our teachers care about the solution. Our parents care about the solution. Our board cares about the solution. And really this is about, and I care about the solution, so really this is about trying to come to the best possible solution, knowing full well, no matter what decision the board makes, there will be people in the room who will say, what were they thinking? And want to push us all off the bridge. But we are going into this with a load of information that we didn't have when we started, and it largely is because of all of you. So thank you, and the microphones are open. If you don't mind, when you come down, there's seats to the sides of the microphones. What I'll do is just cross back and forth so that this line doesn't have to wait forever past this line, and away we go. So the microphones are open.
Good evening, thank you. My name is David Goldsmith. I live on Denbo Road in Durham. I have a few questions. Do you want me to just ask one, or can I wait for an answer, then ask the next one, or how do you want to do that?
Sure. Why don't you ask your question, David, and if I know it, I'll answer it, and we'll move from there.
Okay. I had a question about how the redistricting model would split siblings. The way I look at that, it would only split siblings if parents chose to ask for grandfathering for one of their siblings. Otherwise, they'd all move. Is that the right way to think of that?
No, because I think that there are Massway families who have indicated that there's a possibility that splitting could happen to them. As we talked about this in some length, it became obvious, even though I didn't see it initially, that there would still be some students who might get split from their siblings.
By moving families from Meharmet onto new buses for Massway?
You're talking the bus route solution, right?
I'm sorry, yes, just that way.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm also wondering if you know of other districts that do a managed enrollment model, and if they do, how that works out?
Well, I can tell you, I lived it. So my very first assistant superintendent job, it was my job to manage enrollment in a 400 square mile rural Maine district. Ours is 50 square miles by comparison, so 8 times bigger, but with only 1,500 students. And what was happening is the center of the population center of that district, the school that was occupying that space was a K through 12 school, and it was bursting at the seams, and a school board at the time said, we can't have this anymore. And so in this 400 square mile district, it was largely okay, but occasionally very hot. And I'll give you an example. So population center, you would expect people are going to move into a population center. And so You move in, you're a house, I'm the school. That's how much distance there is between you and me. And I would be the superintendent, assistant superintendent saying, yeah, but you can't go to that school. You have to go to the school literally 30 miles away. And so in that system, that didn't go over really well, but our two schools are like 5 miles apart. So that may not be an issue. What I do anticipate in a managed system is that periodically there will be a parent who says, hold the fort, that's not what I want, and I'm going to have to say, but that's what we have to offer you because that's the space that's available. So it won't be all bells and roses. I think that it'll be okay in our district because of the size. It may be more than okay because of the size, but I anticipate that there will be periodically a parent who says, I don't want that. And we have to be very clear with the real estate agents that this area of the district, you cannot make commitments to either school.
I guess lastly, it's kind of a question. I guess I would hope the board would think about what that might do to a neighborhood. I know a lot of families have been talking about redistricting, what that does to neighborhoods. K2, 3, 4 doesn't really affect neighborhoods. It does in a different way, but to have a district where it was possibly, you know, Meharmet, Mastway, Meharmet, that kind of thing. Yeah. Just to think about that if that's something that we want.
And I think, David, just the way you presented that is exactly the way I'm hoping the rest of the evening goes. I hope the board will think about, or I hope in this question that I've helped, you know, spark a new thought. Because really, if we go through the night like this is going to be an incredibly productive evening. We know that every single option has a plus and a minus associated with it. And so, you know, in the end, you're trying to have more pluses than minuses. So, absolutely. Thank you, David.
Thanks. I'll be back.
Okay.
Hey, Jim. Rob
Hi, Rob.
McEwen, Madbury. First question is about functional capacity. We've been saying that Meharmet has a functional capacity of 349. That is the capacity derived from the capacity study that you guys, the board, you know, engaged, I think, 2011, 2012. And that uses 2K classrooms, 14 core classrooms, and comes up and a half-day K experience to come up with a capacity of 349. I really want the board to understand that that capacity changes in a K2, 3, and 4 model. In a 3-4 model, there are no half-day students. You can't fit twice as many students in the same room. Your capacity at Meharmet, under a 3-4 model, is 317 students using that same number of classrooms, and 356 students using, if you keep the modulars around for a little bit longer. So my question, I think, really to Dr. Morse is, in that, if you take those totals, K2, 3, 4 isn't going to work using the transition that we have on paper that we've been given in that 317 capacity. In fact, my projections show, and I've shared those with you guys, show that you'll have 396 3-4 students in that school in 2015, and that's going to be no less than, 60 students over your capacity, 70 students over your capacity. So you're going to be well over the capacity. You're going to be well over the capacity even if you keep the modulars. So I think I need you to consider that. And Jim, I think, you know, we need to change that number, that 349 number, and try and get to a transition plan in the K2, 3, 4 that actually fits inside the goals that the school district has set out.
Thanks, Rob. And I would just want to reaffirm, Rob came in last week and we went through these numbers and I lifted the numbers right out of the capacity study that was done and did not translate those 2 kindergarten classrooms from potential 40, 20, 40, 60, 80 down to 40. So his numbers are actually right. So thank you, Rob.
Hi there. Shanna Saunders,
Hi, Shanna.
Drive in Madbury. I'm just curious if you could answer how each of the options would affect the relationship with UNH and the interns that are available to the schools right now?
Sure. So I had a conversation with Dr. Schramm, And on the K through 2 model, he thought that would work very well with the intern, with the new major in early childhood education. The 3-4 model, not keen at all on that because he thinks the experience would be too limiting. Then I have not talked to him about managed, but they're K through 4 models, so I would imagine that either the bus rerouting or the managed enrollment option, they would have no concerns about.
Great, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Hey, Jocelyn.
Hi, Dr. Morse. Jocelyn O'Quinn, Durham. I'm a Mohammed mom. I have 2 questions. One's kind of quick. For the managed enrollment, I've been trying to get my mind around that. So we actually just had a child move into our neighborhood. We're not in one of those neighborhoods that would be affected, but we're, half a mile away. We had a new child move in, I believe in 3rd grade, and we have 6 3rd graders in our neighborhood. So assuming we were one of those population center neighborhoods, does that mean that this, and we moved to this model, that a potential 3rd grader could move into the community, drive by the bus stop full of all these other children and keep going into a different school? Is that?
Yeah, that's a fair characteristic of a managed enrollment option, that population center, again, would have no school assigned to it. On the other hand, current students who are assigned to it would not be disrupted.
Okay, I just want to mention, I would like the board to consider that if I was a parent choosing a new house, I probably would not want that kind of neighborhood because I would want my children to have the benefit of children in the neighborhood. So I just think that's something to consider for those neighborhoods. It could impact their real estate sales. At least for me personally, if I were moving into a neighborhood. I know we chose our neighborhood partly because we knew that there were so many kids in the neighborhood that were going to Mohammed. Okay, so my other question is a little longer, and I don't know that we can answer it, but in the matrix that you set up, it's all very interesting, but I'm most interested in the academic benefits, and I think you're kind of addressing it when we talk about unifying staff by grade level, but I think there's a bigger discussion there, and I'd like to hear more. We've heard that the leadership team is in support of the K2 3-4 model, and I have to believe that's because of academic reasons, so I would love to hear more about the academic benefits to our children. So.
Absolutely. When Carolyn and I came on board a year and a half ago, there was a very big distinction, for example, on how math was being implemented at both elementary schools. And at one school, it was a very deliberate series being followed year to year to year. And at the other school, that series existed plus another. And so in terms of the consistency of the math approach, it was depending on the decision an individual teacher was making related to that program. So actually, Carolyn is doing a really good job right now with the principals in managing that issue. But that's an example of how things can get disparate academically. We obviously have an outstanding literacy program in both schools. They're doing fantastic. But another place where we could unify our efforts as well as our professional development is in writing. So those are the 2 areas that benefit by bringing teachers of same grade level together. Carolyn and I talked about this quite a bit today, and although the ideal from my perspective would be having the K2 and 3-4 together in order to work through those issues, we're pretty confident with the support from the community that we've heard in the last 3 meetings that this isn't just a superintendent issue, that this really is a district issue. And as I said, some parents have felt that difference and other parents haven't. But both Carolyn and I, new to the district, we observed it almost instantaneously. We have 2 great staffs, and by bringing them together, we feel like we can do a better job for students. So those are just a couple of examples of how we could improve ourselves academically. And then, if I can just carry a question a little further, non-academically, we have events at both of these elementary schools, and if you live at one or the other, you benefit by those events. we really feel like these events should be district events, and getting our elementary student population together purposefully, not just the grown-ups, but the students, so that they can share experiences, and that, we believe, will help in their transition to the middle school. So there's academic reasons to do it, and I think that there are cultural reasons to do it. But I didn't put this question up. Any of these changes will have some sort of cultural impact. I mean, there's anytime you create a change, you have a cultural impact. For the families whose children would be bused, that's a dramatic impact for them. For the teachers, if we did a K through 2, 3 through 4 option, that's a dramatic cultural change for them, not to mention all of you. So again, I'll go back to David. There are pluses to each of these, there are minuses to each of these, and in the end, we hope the board will choose the one that has the most pluses.
You led right into one of my comments. I'm Katie. I live in Durham, but
Hi,
I grew
Katie.
up in Lee. I started at Mastway School, but when I was entering third grade, there were too many third graders at Mastway School, and a bunch of us who lived somewhere and had to ride a bus either way were switched. It didn't matter that my sister was starting kindergarten that year. She started at Mastway. I was moved to Oyster River. I'm fine. Yeah, I knew some people from, they'd been in my nursery school or whatever, and so I had 3 years at one and 3 years at another, and when we got to middle school, I knew lots of people. So I just wanted to say it's not necessarily the end of the world. We're in one community, and we know each other. So that was my personal experience. But the way you tied in is, as I was thinking about the K through 2 and 3, 4, versus having K through 4 at each school, I was thinking about what is it like in terms of the community that a child has from the child's perspective. And I think it's better to have the group divided, because I think a small child needs a small community. And so you have half as many students in your grade when half of the students are at one school. And I think they get to know those other 70-some students. And I think that's appropriate for K through 4 age group. When you get to middle school and there's 150 in your grade, that's a lot more people to know. But if you go K through 2 right from the start, they're always going to be with that 150 group. So I think that it is better in the smaller environment, as it were. I mean, it's still a large number of students, but in their own cohort, there's a smaller number.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to clarify a little bit because...
Can you say your name? And,
Oh, so my name is Rich Lasker, and I live in Lee. I just wanted to clarify because it seemed a little bit different from what I read here compared to how you described the managed enrollment. Based in here, it just said that families that are new to the district, but you indicated that it was actually not just new to the district, but new to a subset of the district. There's just a certain number of roads that would be
Sure.
on the list of an assignment.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so let me explain that difference. And this is exactly why this issue needs to be refined further. What you're reading is unedited from the parental community that's promoting it. This is my version of it. And so part of bringing this to closure would be, if the board supports it, would be the board to say, Jim, go work with a cross-section of parents, those who support all of these options, and see if this option's the better option and what would it look like in the end. So the handout that was in the room was not my handout.
Oh, okay. All right. That does.
But I love everybody who wrote it.
So, and then just one last thing to clarify is that also would, when you say new to the district, does that just mean kids that are being enrolled? Because my child's in the PEP program, so I mean, I'm not sure exactly how that affects anything. Is it new to the district, or if your child is already enrolled in the school?
Yeah, pre-K is part of our program, so they wouldn't be new to the district because they're already enrolled.
Okay. All right. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you.
Dr. Morris, thank you for giving us this opportunity to ask questions. My question is related to the last gentleman. I noticed, I think it was slide 25, there is a list of bus routes, and it doesn't seem to be comprehensive for Durham. It's subset, as you mentioned, but
Yep.
I also noted that it's only focused on Durham, and would this managed enrollment be inclusive of the entire district or only Durham?
Thanks for that question. population center for our district is in Durham. Is it possible that children in outlying areas could be impacted over time? And the answer to that would be yes. But for this particular conversation, it's about the population center because it's very, very obvious that's where you would need to go. And I'll go back to my second grade example. Say a student moved into what we perceive as the Mast Way community, and their enrollment at a particular grade level was very high. Then I would work with Lisa Hupp, our transportation director, to see if we could place that student in Mohammed economically and stay within the bus ride parameters. So it goes both ways, but the reason I put these routes here is this would be the epicenter of managed enrollment.
Good evening, Vale Cox from Durham.
Hi.
Hi. In discussing, I'm sorry, this microphone's strange. In discussing the K-2, 3, 4 configuration option as it was presented 2 board meetings ago, could you explain why we could not just do a straight cut over to it today and that a transition plan was required? A phasing
Sure.
of shifting of grades, could you explain that?
We could do it overnight. It was more my trying to be sensitive to the community at large and trying to do it in a staged effect, but you know, somebody said do it tomorrow. I would have concerns that Rob has in relation to enrollment now because the updated long-range planning numbers and the fact that I double counted a space causes me a little distress, but I would say it's possible to do that model overnight, but it's not something that I would be supporting, and we'd have to have figure out what the space issue.
I actually thought that it was not possible overnight and that you had explained that we required the transition of phasing grades because the grade-heavy ages that exist today in the school, not projections, but physically we could not cut it over because then either we'd be heavy at Mastway or Mohammed. I thought that was part of your explanation.
Well, if I articulated that way before, I don't think it's quite as black and white as that. I think you can do it overnight. It's just very disruptive.
And I guess, finally, were you aware that in the proposed transition plan for that, children, we talk about siblings being split, and that's obvious when you have a kindergartner and a third grader. Those are split between grades. But that when you do a transitioned plan, children who are even as close together as 1 year apart are essentially split for their entire elementary careers. Yeah. And the sense of community for those children is extremely disrupted within our own family.
I became aware of that through conversations with very informed people like yourself.
Well, I do bring it up because I do want people to be well aware of it.
Thank you.
And I also, my final question is, with the new projections, as they are updated, does the model work at all? Thank you.
Thank you. And I would say based on the latest enrollment projections and the double counting of 1 grade, splitting the district the way I was originally proposing will not work. So remember, we kind of have a landing zone in the front, so if you make yourself present, then you have, first dibs to the microphone.
Hi, Brooke Keeler in Madbury. So I'm just a little confused on something that you probably don't have time to go into tonight, but I'm trying to understand how bringing all the teachers together in the K-2, 3, 4 model makes it better for the teachers or for the education, because from what I hear, we're going to this core competency model, and if you do that, doesn't that get rid of any disparities that you would have between the 2 schools or what you may have observed that you mentioned tonight?
I think that, first of all, the K2 model, bringing all the teachers of the same grade together,
Yeah.
makes it an easier conversation for us to have in terms of how we would accomplish the work we need to accomplish.
Because you're all in one building
Because we're together,
so it's
yeah.
one meeting
Yeah.
instead of two meetings.
Exactly. Or
But it's
traveling.
the same information in both schools to both groups of teachers.
Correct, but
Okay.
you have two different groups of people having the same conversation, you don't necessarily come out with the same outcome. And having them together, you can at least get to consensus.
Okay.
The issue that you also asked about was, I think it was a standards question, and quite honestly, New Hampshire adopting the Common Core and the district working toward the implementation of those standards actually helps us address the very issue that Carolyn and I have been working on since we've been here. So standards is a big help.
Okay. And this question's kind of murky here. I'll try to get it across the best I can. So enrollment is declining, right?
No.
It's going up. So
It's-
the LRPC says it's flat.
It's stabilizing.
It's stabilizing.
Yeah.
And where originally the numbers were going down.
The original numbers were going down over a period of 10 years. The new long-range planning committee numbers actually show us stabilize for at least 3 years, then a modest decrease, and then in the 5th year on, we see more dramatic decreases in enrollment. By the time we get 10 years out, the projections show a pretty dramatic difference between now and then, about 150 students. But remember, at the very beginning, I talked about enrollment projections, and the confidence we have is, in terms of them being accurate, is closer to the time we're in, and the further you get out, the greater there is a margin of error. So we can be fairly confident of the numbers for the first 3 to 5 years, and then less confident as we get further out. So for example, those 30 students who moved in this year made a dramatic impact in terms of stabilizing our enrollment.
Okay. And so would you say you're fairly confident or within some sort of percentage that over the next, between years 5 and 10, we are experiencing some sort of population decrease?
Sure. And so why would I be as confident? The enrollment decline is happening statewide, and it's happening regionally. New England is losing thousands of students to the south and the southwest. And so that trend in the state and the nation really reflects the census. Again, if Lisa Allison were here, she would tell you that the birth rate for this year was 84 students. If we go back 10 years, it was 140 students. Okay. So you can see that the numbers will never show us growing. And in fact, being able to say we'd be stable for 5 years is really a great bit of news for all of us, because up until this year, everybody thought the decline was going to happen faster.
So then my last question is, in the managed enrollment option, where you're king of the hill, do you envision extreme examples like 7 third graders on a street and now 1 third grader has to go to a different school? Or
Yeah.
I was under the impression that in the managed enrollment, there was talk of the oldest child being the kindergartner entering the school, and that it said something about
Sure.
7 to 10 or something like that. That's all you would
And again, the difference in
need?
that position is the position of the parents who generated the idea versus how I would want to see it happen. And so the difference in enrollment is too dramatic for us to allow it to happen 7 students at a time. We have to make tough decisions now, regardless of the model we're in order to take that pressure point off of the Mohammed school. And 7 students a year doesn't resolve the problem quick enough. That's my position. But I respect the position of the crew that put that together, and we'll talk some more through it. I would rather not be in a position of picking 1 or 2 kids if I can say, this resolves it. And once we do have parity, equity, not equality, the number of students who would be impacted per year would actually go down dramatically, because all you have to do at that point is maintain.
Sorry, just one more thing. So then your first year that you do this, let's say it's next year, that'll probably be the bulk of the change or the movement, or where you're asking somebody in the population district, you're asking 10 families or whatever it is.
I think it would take
Okay.
two school years to do that.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. But again, these are models in discussion. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, I am Lauren Selig, and I have a couple different things. I want to get clear about one thing. So in this zone approach, where there's a zone of families or of streets where houses could go one way or the other, and I'm going to just use the board members up here as examples. So if Kenny lives on the street and his daughter starts kindergarten this year, and she's assigned to Mastway, and then Anne moves in, and her son she has a third grade son and a first grade son, and she gets assigned to Mohammed, and then her daughter, who's younger, gets assigned to Mastway? Or does she, once she's in a school, she stays at that school?
Part of the parental proposal on managed enrollment would safeguard siblings. So if you have a sibling in the school, you wouldn't break them up.
Okay. So we have this lovely community. Jocelyn actually lives around the corner from me, and as she said, we have a brand new family that just moved in, so we've increased Mohammed's enrollment by one more this week from another third grade boy. And, and again, we have 4 third grade boys, as well as my third grade daughter, all living within 6 houses. And so if we were in the zone, which we're not, that would mean that he would be the only child in third grade at a different school because he came in mid-year and after this process. And so, speaking as a real estate professional, what I can say is if I say to a group of families, okay, well, if you buy a house on this street, your children are guaranteed to go to this school. And if you live on this street, your kids are guaranteed to go on this school. And if you live in this neighborhood, well, it's going to depend on the year your kids start what they need. People are going to say to me, I want to live in either one of those 2 zones. It's not going to be about which school. It's going to be about wanting to know where they're going. Mm-hmm. And that variability is going to cause housing values in that pocket to go down because people are going to find that less desirable. The other thing that I hope the board will consider is there are certain neighborhoods in our community where there's, Allison, would you call it a slightly aging population? People who've aged out of the district? Yeah, their kids have graduated. They're likely to begin downsizing. And those neighborhoods are in the process of having significant turnover. And so in those neighborhoods, which may or may not be in this pocket, we're going to start having additional shifts. And so I just would like people to keep in mind that this zone approach, while it sounds really lovely for the people who are outside of it, from a real estate perspective, I cannot imagine trying to figure out how to make that work. The other concern that I have is I know that for myself, we enrolled my daughters at growing places when they were in preschool, in large part because since we only have a half-day kindergarten, I needed to know where they could go after school. And the way our busing is structured right now, from Mohammed, they could get bused to growing places. They couldn't get bused to live and learn. There are kids who go to Mastway who can't get bused to growing places, can only get bused to live and learn. And so unless we're going to allow the buses to, for various things like that, cross these boundaries and allow for more flexibility within those programs, that's something else we really need to keep in mind, especially with this zone approach. If I don't know what school my child's going to go to, how do I begin when they're in preschool making the appropriate thing so that they can be directed where they need to go?
Thank you, Lauren. So I can't address real estate issues, but I can address preschool issues. Mm-hmm. And as recently as this week, I sat with Lisa and said, it is inherently unfair that one set of parents can get their students to private daycare and another group of parents cannot. And so she is working on a scheme for next year where every parent would be able to have their child go to the preschool, private preschool, that their child is enrolled in. So it'll be part of our bus routes.
Okay.
Hi, Dave.
Hi. Dave again. I had some more questions about the, one of the gentlemen had asked, would it be, for the managed enrollment, would it be new to the district? He had a child in the PEP program, and you said it would be people who had yet to enroll, but I'm wondering, are those families who have yet to move here? Or would that be families who have lived here for 5, 6, however many years, now have children, have known that their kid will be going to school X, and now all of a sudden has to change?
Well, you get two different answers again because we haven't worked out the particulars. Mine would be if a child hasn't started school yet, then they would be part of the managed enrollment. The parents who created this option may have a different answer, I don't know. And then your second part of that was, what, Dave? Did I answer it?
Oh yeah, I don't think I had a second part yet.
Oh, okay. I thought there was a part two.
But here's the second part.
Oh, okay.
I'm wondering, when the board asked you to come up with options, this was not one of the options that you came up with?
Correct.
I'm wondering why, especially because you had already done it.
I did put it on the table a year ago, March. It was part of a presentation I gave to the board. And personally, I didn't want to revisit my past and do managed enrollment. But having talked to this group of parents last Thursday, I'd be willing to revisit it. The 400 square mile district had all kinds of issues associated with managed enrollment, and I gave you a little bit of it. 50 square mile district wouldn't necessarily have those same problems. And so that's why I was willing to give it serious consideration. Plus, the board said, come back with the kindergarten option and other options. And so managed enrollment was an option that I presented, but didn't vet out like this group of parents have.
I guess I'm wondering about it if it penalizes new families at the expense of all of us who currently live here. That's a question I'm thinking about.
Sure.
And I'm thinking about it because I feel like I helped cause this problem. I moved to Durham almost 2 years ago. I have a daughter who's in first grade. I think we have a lot of families who've recently moved here. We're all part of the reason that there is overcrowding.
Well, thank you for moving to the district.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. And I wonder if it's a good, I don't know, precedent or philosophical idea to think that everyone who's here currently should never be disrupted, but all new folks should have some option. I don't know if there's even an answer to that. I just am thinking about it, and I wonder about it. And I guess lastly, I just want to say I'm an elementary school teacher. I've taught since 1998, and I taught in Connecticut in a district that's very much like this, fabulous children, great raw materials, as you said 2 meetings ago, and a great budget. Everyone loves the schools. They had a huge transition issue with buildings that were being demolished by termites, and so they went through this whole redistricting issue, and for a number of years I taught in the 4-5 building. It was the only 4-5 building in the district. We had 600 4th and 5th graders. It was very smelly, but it was fabulous. And it was really very exciting. And some of the parents have been asking about like PD issues for parents. The fact that this district had all of the 4th and 5th grade teachers in one building allowed for constant professional development that was not scheduled by the district. We simply were all there together. We simply all shared with each other. Like Oyster River, we had teachers who were very independent in their teaching styles. We did not simply provide a program. We taught standards and we taught them in our own ways. It was very eclectic. And it was a very, very magical place for the years that happened. And I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi. My concerns is I feel like there are two conversations going on here, sort of two issues, and one is about enrollment and the other is about the construct of our elementary schools. Mm-hmm. And I feel like these two topics are being kind of rolled into one decision all at once. And so far I haven't heard much about what the concerns are about our current model, and I'm pretty new to the area, but so far my 1.5 years here, I feel like I've been very impressed about the K-4 model, and I seem to hear that a lot from the community in the school. So I guess one question I have is, what are the concerns about the current model? And if there are concerns about it, it seems like that's a separate conversation that should be handled separately. And I'm sure there's other models, even beyond K-4 model and K-2-3-4 models. There must be many, many models if we're concerned about our current construct that we should look into. So I guess the two questions I have are, is there a concern about what we're doing now? And if so, it seems like we should be taking a much more mindful and broad approach to how to pick the best model for our elementary school
Sure.
structure.
So, thanks, Rachel. The concerns I have are the fact that all 4 of our schools, not just the elementaries, but the middle school and high school, for a very long time have operated sort of as islands without a lot of communication, either up through the grades or between the 2 schools. And so it's about common curriculum expectations, developing common professional development programs, experiences that our students have at both schools. So saying all of that, I also want to make sure that everybody understands, because I've said this many, many times, we have 2 great K through 4 schools. So in creating a model that's different, it's really trying to attack those issues. And you're right, there's 2 different things going on here, and what I was attempting to do, and not being very successful, is roll them into one solution and address both the enrollment issue and the cohesion and coordination issue at the same time. So, thanks. Hi.
And I am a resident of Madbury. I have a son who's in Mohammed, who I'm hoping is probably not affected by this. But I work as a speech pathologist in a different district, and I do have a couple comments that kind of relate to what she was just talking about. So the first would be that in terms of issues, when it comes to curriculum and our teachers and what I see in this district is magical. It's just plain magical. What we do with our K through 4 is nothing like I've ever seen, ever. And what our teachers do in terms of cohesion and collaboration is just as magical. There is always going to be room for improvement, and I think a lot of that improvement comes through things that are smaller and very manageable. So when our teachers get together and they do collaboration things, you know, inside of a single school, when they have in-service days and they do all those, there's no reason why both districts can't be together. Common Core is going to guide this, and no matter what we do, you know, I think about this K2 and 3-4 model, which I'm not a fan of, but I think about what is actually accomplished in terms of academics. And what I see, and I'm in a district, and I have been for many, many, many years, that is a pre-K all the way through grade 8. What I see working in those school districts is when teachers in kindergarten talk to the first grade teachers and talk to the second grade teachers, because the way the course standards are actually set up, and I don't know how familiar you guys are with them, but a skill translate and builds on, it's built on the skill before it and the skill before it. And our classrooms are not, you know, our kids don't magically all show up on the same levels. So no matter what, it's the connection between those grades that actually makes that cohesion magical. That's what I love about the school that I'm in, and I'm sure that's a lot of what Mastway students and parents feel, you know, in terms of their school. Because those teachers know each other really well. If we want to give those teachers more opportunity to work together, then let's just do more things together and set up more common objectives together. But I don't know that we need to split our kids. Only one more thing, sorry, I know I'm over my 3 minutes. The other thing that I really, really appreciate about the school that I'm in and the school experience that my older daughter who's in middle school got to have, and what my son is currently set up to have, is that there's a level of place. There's, oh, I had this teacher and this teacher, and I sure hope I get them, or I've been seeing them a lot in the hall, and they know I'm the sister of this person or that, or the brother of that person, and I hope I get them someday. It's not a matter of this is what I'm used to. It's a matter of this is what I'm looking forward to. our schools are like a family. And I think that they function best as a family. So keeping some level of, K1, 2, 3, 4, I think the piece that makes that great is it functions like a multi-age family. And for all the reasons that the graphs look great, and honestly, I'm very interested in that new proposal, very interested. I think that the thing that comes down to it is I love my child's experience because there is that, and because I get to see on a regular basis what happens without that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellie. Just before we go to the next one, I do want to talk about an option that I did consider that isn't up here, and that is the K-8 option. It doesn't work for a host of reasons. One, for our district. One is it would take an immense capital campaign to improve the elementary schools so they would have the same facilities that we would want for them that they have currently at Oyster River Middle School, and we would have to increase staffing in order to accomplish it. So although I've heard a lot about pre-K through 8 model and the research associated with it, the way that we currently are structured, it would be a very expensive model for us to move forward on. I also would, again, just remind everyone that you can see that there are a number of people on both sides who want to come to the microphone, and I'm not going to run a stopwatch. I'm just going to ask you to, kind of self-regulate. And remember that tonight's about questions. And if we all stand up and do the positions, it's going to take a lot longer than if you ask questions. So I believe, your side.
I'm Jody from Madbury. A few different questions. The first, the K2, 3, 4. I'm just curious, you talked about having the elementary district-wide do more common activities, events. Would you expect that to be the case even in a K2, 3, 4 model?
Yes, I think that part of what we need to do is really, I agree with everything Ellie said about, and David for that matter, they use the words magical and, a wonderful place to have students, but that magic is happening isolated from each other, and we really need to bring that community, both communities, and then the middle school and high school community to be part of a cohesive plan and not separate entities. So yes.
That's good. Just having so many kids, it's difficult to juggle everything as it is. I couldn't imagine trying to juggle, so I'm happy to hear that. Going to your experience you said you had with the managed enrollment, I think it's really in our benefit that you've got that history. And would you be able
That's where I lost my hair.
Yeah. I've been wondering that, right? So would you be able to share a little bit of why that was so rigid in your experience? And also, do you feel like you could tap into maybe that not so great period of your life to help make this position, this time of our lives and our communities better, to craft it a way that would work?
Sure. Thank you, Jody, for that question. So this map looks like it's a rigid map that if you're in the green zone, you're in trouble in terms of what school you would go to. This was very much like the district that I was assistant superintendent on, and then if you take that green and you add a red and a yellow and a blue, the board's plan in terms of equalizing enrollment was incredibly rigid. I think that putting together a managed plan proposal, I would be recommending to the board to not be quite so rigid and allow me and my team, Carrie and Dennis, and Lisa, our transportation director, our elementary principals and our transportation director, the latitude to make the right decision based on the needs of a particular school or grade. So in the front part of this, it definitely would be front-loaded with a lot of tough decisions, but once it was in place, those decisions could be much more subtle. So flexibility, I guess, is the key.
Common sense, flexibility and common sense would be included. Great. Let's see. The other thing, did I hear you correctly earlier when you were saying that in your kind of vision of playing that out, the first 2 years you felt would be where there'd be the most disruption as we kind of would be adjusting as a community to this, and then from going forward it would be more the you would manage kind of the inputs, those incoming new people, the littlest ones, and then that way the numbers would kind of stabilize? Is that what I heard you say?
That's
2
what-
years?
Yeah, I think that's what would happen, just by the nature of the beast. You know, as this model matures, I would sit with the transportation director and the special ed director and the two elementary principals and say, okay, you know, is this a child that needs to go to a different elementary school, or can this child go to the school that's closest to them? So the example I keep on going back to is our current second grades. If one more student moves into Mohammed, then we'll trip over the magic 22. But if the board gave me the authority, I could say, unfortunately, those classes are full, and I need you as a new family in the district, your child has to go to Mastway. So it wouldn't be arbitrary. I mean, it would be based on the needs of the district. And then with Catherine Plord, our special ed director, if a child enrolled and had special needs, there may be that a program best benefits a student at one elementary school or the other because of the services we're offering at one school or the other. So it becomes really important that she's part of the decision-making process.
Cap, the special ed, okay.
Yep.
So you're going to wish you'd had your stopwatch, because my last question. I saw 1.5 slides on cost savings, and I thought we were talking about number of children and educational benefit, but I saw a slide all about how much the different ones cost, and I'm really just surprised and kind of sad to see that. And I heard you earlier say that the K2, 3, 4 with the new LRP, whatever projection numbers, really isn't viable. So then that leaves the other 3, the all-day K at Mastway, which you and I met in August about that, which had a cost increase of, net increase I think you had of $42,500.
See if I can find it.
Is at the end.
Oh, I'm going the wrong way.
And then you had the redistricting. So it starts, it's here, it started a little bit before. You started on cost savings on the previous slide. Yes, drivers.
Yep.
And then you go to the next, and I was really, it seemed like the biggest savings was cutting into that special ed audience, which gives me major concern, especially, I'm not sure if it's STAR or Common Core, I just know that there's a lot more opportunity for services for a lot more kids at early intervention, which sounds great, but if you start reducing the number of people, that worries me. And then I heard you say we're getting, the K2, 3, 4 is really not viable. So the cost savings, or is it a cost addition for the all K at Mastway actually costs more?
Correct.
So then the two that really don't cost anything are the hard kind of redistricting or this management. Whatever decision you make, is the board really always bottom line going to look at,
No.
we can save money?
This-
Is that how we're going to make a choice?
This slide was a direct result of a parent at our last meeting saying that I didn't have numbers up for them to digest. And so this is my
Cost
attempt.
numbers?
Yeah, parents in the community asked me to answer this question.
Okay, I was just
The
surprised.
the board is very rarely, like in my year and a half, never have they made a decision about students based on the dollars. The board, for example, we created a 1-2 position at Mohammed because of enrollment. They just simply said identify where in the budget you would find the money to pay for that teacher.
Okay.
So I would say that the board has been excellent at saying what's the educational goal we're trying to achieve as opposed to the financial one. We build the budget, we have to think about finances. Once the budget is done, then the board gives me discretion to address our needs as long as they know what it is I'm doing.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, this side.
Hi, I'm Dr. Joe Hannon from Lee.
Hi, Joe.
I think I was one of the people complaining about not having the numbers at the last meeting, so thanks for that.
All right. Validated.
Wait, I'm about to throw you over the bridge.
Oh, man.
No, I'm just kidding.
Came that close.
There'll be a rope. It's up to you whether it's a bungee or around your neck. So,
That would probably hurt my back.
what I'm curious about is the K2, 3, 4 model as an option that you say is going to help the teachers with, their approach to educating the children. What actual academic or do you know of any studies or literature in the educational world that shows that that is a better model and has better educational outcomes for the children? Or are we, I understand that it's easier for the administration, which you've said that it is definitely an easier model to administer as a superintendent, as principals, but is it easier, and then a second part of that question, is it better to move all of the children around to this model that's really not proven to be better in the literature that I've seen, than to have the teachers from one school go to the other to get their enrichment? Or I know we're in the modern era now and we have the internet and things like that. How hard would it be to do a conference or a video conference with teachers from both schools? So I don't see that as a major issue as to pushing us towards a K through 2 approach. I'm open, I'm against that model right now, but I'm very open to hearing, to being convinced otherwise, but I haven't seen anything in the educational literature that says it's a better model for the children. I know that you mentioned the idea of K through 8 that you liked, but it would be too expensive, and the literature does show that children do better in a K through 8 model, but we've been breaking that up and we seem to be going in the opposite direction. And there are some definite pluses to having the kids in the certain age group models, you know, two grades apart. But the real world isn't like that. We don't put all the 40-year-olds over here and all the 35-year-olds over here.
But we do all our 65-year-olds.
You go to an old folks home, they split them up too. The old 80-year-olds don't like. But what I'm saying is we're not really preparing them for life when we it's bad enough we keep kids in a classroom because, all right, you're 6 years old, you belong with these guys. I understand we have to do it some way, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but the fact that we want to just box them together by age, it limits the experience they get from kids that are older, that are younger. I've gone to I mentioned at the last meeting, I went to several different grade schools, redistricted, I went to private public schools, and the best model I saw was a K through 8 where I was actually jealous. I went there in 7th and 8th grade, and I was actually jealous of the kids who'd been there the whole time. They knew all the teachers. Every kindergarten teacher knew the 8th grader running down the hall, and they knew what to say to them. They knew what to say to the teachers to say, oh yeah, he was like this as a kid and he's progressing this way. So what literature, basically to recap the question.
I know what the question is.
Make
John,
it brief.
Sure.
What proof is there that it's a better model?
Sure.
I could have just said that.
Yeah, you could have.
Yeah.
And
it's not as much fun.
You know, I'm bouncing on the bungee cord right now. There is, I think the key words you used, Joe, were literature versus research. There is no research that supports either model. K4, K5, K6. There is research that shows K8 works. Right. There is no research that supports a K2, 3, 4 model. The model we have, and I've said this several times now, is a direct result of an industrial model where we move kids through a system like an assembly line. And that was exactly why it was designed. So we have half dozen cases in New Hampshire that I put up where that model works. We also have our own model, which we know works. So in terms of research, none. In terms of literature and real life, we know it works here. We know that the other model works in other systems in New Hampshire. It really is about what we want as a community. And as we go through these discussions, what ultimately we leave with as a superintendent and a school board is, you know, incredibly passionate people, parents, wanting a model or another model, and ultimately it really boils down to the pluses and the deficits of any model they're considering, and then what we think is best for the community. So no research, plenty of case studies on both models. If we were 110 years ago, we wouldn't have created the K through 4 model because we know our kids aren't bottle caps or engines in Detroit. But that's the model that was divided from.
Okay, last real brief. Since we don't have any evidence to back up doing this model, even versus what we have, why change what's, in your own words?
You do have evidence. You have other school systems that have done that and are as successful as we are.
there's evidence that their outcomes have been improved from changing the model?
Exeter is a model, is a school system that is very well regarded.
It's a good school, but have they improved with the change?
Joe, I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know
Well,
the
all right.
history
That's
of
all
that.
I wanted to know. I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
really...
Remember I said I would say I don't know.
I appreciate it. I appreciate your candor, but I'm just trying to get to the bottom of, if we don't know, why experiment on our children until we do know? I mean, when I was in school, I had a pharmacology professor that said, there's a lot of new drugs out there, but let someone else give the new drug to their patient first.
Thanks, Joe. Mama and a baby, you mind? Baby will take precedent to the microphone?
Sorry, I'm not sure how much longer I have anyway.
Okay, that's why I thought you might want to, if you didn't mind.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I have two things I want to say. First is just...
Name and town?
Oh, sorry. Laura Williams, Durham.
Thank you, Laura.
First, I want to just express gratitude for the conversation. I feel like it's really opened my eyes to a lot of things, and I appreciate that
More
very
than welcome.
much. The second thing I wanted to say is kind of in your experience with managed enrollment, it sounds to me like the demographics in our district are kind of different from, obviously, the demographics in the community that you were in previous to this. And I'm just wondering if, because of that difference in demographics, you feel like a managed enrollment system would be easier to implement, and maybe that we would run into, like the examples that people are coming up with, I think are valid. Well, two things I want to say. The examples that people are coming up with are quite valid. One third grader in a neighborhood of 7 third graders, that's going to be a tough situation, and I totally recognize that. So I think that maybe there are a couple of things to throw out there about that. One is there going to be some sort of appeals process that in a certain kind of situation, a parent might have, or a family might have a way to express that they're in a certain situation where they may have a very valid benefit or reason to request a certain school. So there's going to be that. Is there going to be a process for that? And then the other thing I wanted to know, with your experience in this kind of situation, I feel like over time in this sort of bridge zone or whatever it's going to be called, or population center, that over time I think that running into the 1 third grader going to one school and 7 third graders going to another school is not going to happen. You're going to have a much more mixed and balanced neighborhood. In a way, that might be a benefit to this Mastway versus Moheramet contention. You'll have a mixed community living together side by side, and that might actually be a good thing in the long run. So
Yeah, I would consider the current population center as dark green as the map shows, but I also think that we have to be thinking in terms of the rest of the district being light green. In other words, there is a possibility, and I've said this earlier, that someone outside of that population center, because it makes more sense as they move in, would go to one school or the other. And I do think that any of these changes, as we've talked about them tonight, would cause far more disruption in the first couple of years, but then over time you settle into a routine. So absolutely, but I don't want to underestimate the fact that periodically there will be a family who wants to push me off the bridge. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. Thank you for your patience.
I'm Jennifer Vetter. I'm a Durham resident and a Mastway mom. I have one question of my own and then one from somebody else. I went to your kindergarten question answer last spring, and I took away from that the barrier for kindergarten was cost, not space.
All day kindergarten.
Right, so I'm curious, did we find money or?
No, this would still be half-day kindergarten in the managed enrollment initially.
So
but
full-day kindergarten is not part of the managed?
it's still on my agenda.
Right.
And I hope to be able to convince the school board in the near future that we should go to all-day K.
Okay.
And so.
But as of today, like
as
the money
of
doesn't
today,
exist?
Correct.
Okay.
But it could not next budget, but it could happen very, very quickly after that if we have community support and obviously the board support.
Okay. Our next question is, do you mind go back to slide 4? I have a quick
No.
question about the redistricting. You mentioned in this redistricting that you would probably grandfather in, I think that was the father's original question about how you would split siblings.
Sure.
If you grandfathered in, say, 2nd grade and above. And right
Because
now
fourth
you
grade
have.
is going to fifth.
Exactly.
So
So
they're
in
done.
this list,
Yeah.
you have 11 fourth graders that we might as well not count because they won't be there next year.
Correct.
Well, but they're moving on to fifth grade in the, this is
has been-
2013, this is right now. This is the grade that they're in right now.
We're using the current enrollment
Okay.
because Lisa has no way of estimating.
Right. So I guess
kindergarten.
our question was, if you went this route, and if the board opts to grandfather in second, third, and fourth grade, we're now only moving 26 kids. Does that mean the net goes wider?
No, what it means is the following year, you've already grandfathered a grade, so that grade is no longer grandfathered and so forth. So if the board decided to grandfather second and third grade as they become third and fourth grade, then it means that it would take 2 additional school years to get to the number of 66 students or thereabouts.
But the
So it
ultimate
doesn't
goal,
happen.
so not 66 students next year. but
Correct.
66 students, okay.
Yeah.
And my other statement was, my family moved here 3 years ago, and we actually were assigned to Mohammed for a day because kids hadn't lived in our house in like 40 years. So they didn't know where to put us. And at that time, I still remember this conversation when Dennis called that morning. He was very apologetic, and he said, I can let you come, but we're at capacity, so I can't guarantee that you can stay. This was 3 years ago. My concern is that we've let this happen. I mean, we have, and I feel the idea of passing the burden on to new families, to me, just feels immoral. I mean, we've done this. I mean, even as, like I said, full 3 years ago, and Dennis was saying this, we can't guarantee that you can stay because we're already at capacity. And there's a good chance you could spend the semester here. This was January that we moved in. And he was saying we could spend the semester there, but there was a good chance that we would be reassigned to Massaway. So at the time, we opted just to go to Massaway, knowing that we could stay there, because that was important to us, the continuity. So I have that's my issue with the thing, and I know you guys will take everything into consideration, but, and I thank you for the statements about trying to unite some of the community. I think those of us, I live on the line in Durham, and one of the issues that a lot of us who have on the line is the feeling of this division. There's sort of a squiggly imaginary line down Mill Road, and we live on one side of it, and I'm very happy with our school, but you know, the children across the street from us have access to a maple sugaring curriculum that my kids will never have, and I pay the same taxes in Durham as everybody else. And it's that sort of, and I understand that that was started by parents and teachers at Mohammed, but it's just that sort of, I don't know who came up with this idea to divide this town, but we're dealing with the ramifications of it now. And whatever decisions you guys make, people 10 years from now will be dealing with ramifications of what we're doing today. So I hope we will take that into consideration.
Thank you, Jennifer.
That's it.
Rob?
Rob McKeown, Mabry, quick fire round. Jim, did I hear you say earlier on that you can't
It's always dangerous when he starts with those phrases.
Did I hear you earlier on saying that you can't get K2, 3, 4 to work, a transition to work with your capacity that you have available to you?
Yeah, with the updated numbers and the fact that I counted classroom space twice, yes.
All right. Are you going to take it off the table?
Well, the board is sitting right here. They'll know on Wednesday that it doesn't work.
Second question was actually all-day K. Do any of the options offer all-day K sooner? And do any of the options take all-day K off the table for the foreseeable future?
I think managed enrollment gives me the opportunity to have the conversation with the school board as soon as 2015-16, which is the year after this one that's coming up. So that's pretty exciting to me, and I know that it's a very high priority with the parental community. The other options, it really depends on how those numbers fare out over time, but it would take longer to do it.
The board's information. I'm more than happy, even though my kids won't get all-day K, to pay a few more dollars in taxes to let the future kids get all-day K. Final question. The cafeteria, how does that improve equity at Maharima?
Thank you, Rob. That's not come up recently. So I appreciate the question on the cafeteria. 3 schools have a dedicated cafeteria. 1 school does not. The 1 school that does not is Mohammed. And what we learned in this fall is Dennis Harrington, the principal, and I were investigating the possibility of adding a cafeteria space to Meharmet, is that in the original design, for those of you who are familiar with the building, you actually can see that it was designed to have a semi-permanent curtain that would close, folding partition. And because of funding at the time, it was never done. If you're a parent of a Meharmet student, then you know your children look like they're going to lunch in a giant wagon train that never stops. It's 75 minutes of children in line, getting their food, eating, and moving on. So Rob has given me an opportunity to pitch you, and so I'm going to take it. We are the beneficiaries of a lawsuit that was won against the local government center and how they were handling health care. And as a result of that lawsuit, we learned this summer that the district could expect about $688,000 back. We had budgeted not knowing that we were going to get that money back. And so I asked the board for permission to, rather than one option, give the money back to the taxpayers, invest that money in a long-standing issue of generating a dedicated cafeteria space at Meharmet. You all get to vote on that issue in March, because the board has also given me permission to go forward and hire an architect and a contractor. But we won't go any further than that unless we have permission from the voters to spend that money. Of the 688, 188 of it belongs to our employees because it was their money that was put in, but 500 belongs to the district. And in addition, we have another approximately $100,000 that's been set aside for capital improvement. So I asked the board to ask you as voters for permission to use that money to create a dedicated cafeteria, thus creating equity between all 4 schools in relation to a dedicated eating space. I think the staff at Meharmet have done a really great job in managing the lunchroom, but how many of us would really want to eat in a room where just moments before sweaty, stinky people were running around? And we also have safety issues in that room because it is serving as a cafeteria. When the tables are folded and put aside, they're literally put aside at the edge of the gymnasium. And so when PE is happening, there's always the possibility that a child will run full square right into a cafeteria table. So I hope that as a result of this evening, you are now way more informed than you were, and that you will consider voting for utilizing those monies to add a cafeteria at Meharmet. Thanks, Rob. Let's see, it was this side, I think.
Hi, Jim Warden from Lee.
Hi, Jim.
Going back to the numbers, I was wondering, you have 4 different options up there. I was wondering if you had one thought of, when you do your redistricting, partial redistricting, and then using that as having maybe a smaller managed enrollment area, so you have a less impact on the real estate market that everyone's worried about. It seems to me if you,
sure.
Instead of doing a strict redistricting or a strict you deciding every new member coming in where they're going to go, if you did a partial redistricting, you could then just have a smaller managed control area.
Sure. We can investigate that. So this was our first blush at taking an idea we heard last week and seeing what that center of the population that would need to be. And so Lisa Hopp, our transportation director, took an idea she literally heard on Friday and gave me a map that she thought would work. So is that, a finished product? It was just a demonstration for this evening so that you guys would have a sense of what the idea meant. Yeah. So is it all encompassing? Maybe, maybe not. We'd have to refine that further.
Just seems that would be one of the easiest ways to, you're not going to, a lot of tough choices. You're not going to make a lot of friends, but good luck with it.
Hey, thanks, Jim. I have to be honest, I actually have made a lot of friends. People have stopped by for coffee that I never met before, so it's been great. Yes.
Beth Olshansky from Durham. My 3 children went through the school system, and we were involved in redistricting a few times, and it was fine. We went from one fine school to another, and I think it's pretty clear that we have 2 highly functional schools with fabulous school communities that people really treasure. And in my mind, why take a sledgehammer to what should really be used at tweezers to just make some minor adjustments? And so one of the things I've been thinking about, and I wonder if the board and Dr. Morse has thought about this as a further refinement of some of the options presented, with the busing redistribution. I had heard David Taylor say, and I saw it on this slide today, that you would consider grandfathering in students who are already at a school. So take another layer of refinement from that, and you might offer parents in those neighborhoods the opportunity for choice. For instance, if I had a 3rd grader or a 4th grader in one of the designated neighborhoods, I would probably choose to have my student continue at the school he or she was at. But if I had a 2nd grader and I knew the following year my kindergartner was going to be coming online, and that kindergartner was going to go to, let's say, Mastway, then I might choose to keep my siblings together. So it would offer families, I think, another layer of choice, depending on, if your child is the last of the litter, you might choose to keep them at the same school. If you have other siblings coming up behind, you may choose to keep your kids together. And it just, I think, perhaps that sense of choice might help soften the decisions for many families.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
So I just want to remind everybody of the time. We're about 7 minutes of 9, and we're going to try to wrap this up.
Good evening. Steve Wargiotis. I live in Durham.
Hi, Steve.
Oyster River 91. My wife is Anita Mather, Oyster River 92, and also the founder of the Oyster River Alumni Association.
I bet we met your wife at the last meeting.
I know you did. And she also did her doctorate in education and the ability of educational institutions to drive economic outcomes, in particular around poverty. That's not really an issue here in the Oyster River District, but one of the many long-term outcomes of our school is community. It's cohort. And one of the long-term benefits that I would hope the board will be considering is how this sets up our children to grow into the future and have a strong community that they feel welded to. The other night, my wife and I went to a pre-holiday party for a bunch of our classmates who were all turning 40. And it was interesting that even now, the Mastway kids hung out together. The Oyster River Elementary School kids hung out together. And they were even showing pictures before they were brought together as a unit. So I would ask the board, how strongly are you considering our ability to deliver community? The second question that I have is really more just around other long-term outcomes. We are seeing a lot of challenges around the transition, around managing the change. But there are many children who are going to be affected by this year, 10 years from now, 20, 30, 50 years from now, because a change that goes into this system will take a long time to reverse or modify. And I would just ask how the board is agreeing on a scorecard that you will all use to evaluate this in its long-term outcomes and balance that with being sensitive to all the very committed and excited parents here who have children who have to make that transition.
Thanks, Steve. And I would just reiterate that, this school board has been charged with making pretty momentous decisions, and this is one of them. And we also are dealing with a high school issue that's pretty momentous. So, the time to be on the school board probably for the 7 school board members was not this year, but here they are. folks, I don't want to, I want to start meetings on time and end them on time. I really thank you very, very much for being here tonight. It's been a raucous and very deep debate and dialogue with the community. I really have made friends and probably met parents that I would never have met outside of a discussion like this, and I thank all of you for reaching out. On Wednesday, the board is going to deliberate. They're going to have this conversation in front of cameras, so you don't need to be there. You can watch it from your living room. There's a question and answer period before and after the board meeting, but the whole point of having tonight was to keep this fresh for them. So what I guess I'm saying is you're always welcome to come to a public meeting of the board, but if we had this many people show up to a public meeting of the board, the question and answer period would be very short and very frustrating for all of you. And so tonight was the opportunity for you to have, you know, their full ears and attention, and to elaborate through questioning where you see strengths and weaknesses. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate tonight. I came in tonight wondering whether I would be pushed off the bridge, and, you know, other than Joe, I only came close. I was never actually pushed. So thank you so much for this evening.